Hi, we are just finished with our cast on, and we have our pair of circular needles with some DK yarn that has been cast on 23 stitches. This matches a pattern that we're going to do for a brioche scarf. The important thing when working flat is you want to have an odd number of stitches because the first stitch and the last stitch act as sort of a guardrail, if you will. It's sort of like a locking stitch on each side of the garment that is not brioched. It tends to either be slipped or purled or knit on its own. And in this pattern that we're doing for the class, we've also created the outside edge to always be using the main color of the garment. So in this case, it was this raspberry pie pink color, pinkish purple, and then our orange is our contrast color. So you can see on the edges of the garment, you've got the pink, and on the cast on the pink, and over here on the outside edge, pink, and where the bind off is, or bind off cast on again, it's like down here is pink. It's all the borders. So brioche on one side of the garment, you're going to have your main color be dominant, and on your other side, it's the contrast color that's dominant. Just something to know in terms of wondering where you are in the project as you're working. If you have the dominant main color sides facing you, that means you're on the main color rows. Basically, that is you would know in the sequence where you are as you're working your main color first, then your contrast color. Opposite kind of side, it's your main color goes first, but your contrast color is the one that's more dominant on this side. So you should be expecting to have your slip one yarn over stitches look like the appropriate side. So we'll get into that when we're actually doing this, but just something to know when you're looking at the pattern that you want to choose the main color that you would like to have as your border all the way around it if you're going to be following the pattern we're doing in the class. Not every pattern is written like that. This was more of a choice to just for the two colors to make it nice and easy to know where you were doing it. All right, so we're going to put that aside. And we have our main color today is an orange jellies, and our pink raspberry pie is going to be our contrast color on this project. So it's going to be opposite of what I did on this sample. And what we have done here is we've done the cast on for the correct number of stitches called for in the pattern for this weight. That should get us about a little over 5 inches when it's all spread out. Also know that while this looks very small, brioche expands very like crazy, so it will not take long before this is much wider on the needles. So just be aware. What the bind off and the cast on often do is kind of act like a little bit of a binder. This brioche can be very, very stretchy, so there are some methods where you do not just cast on with one color, you go ahead and start right away with the two colors interspersed. That's more advanced than I usually prefer to do with my patterns and the ones that I've knit for fun that I bought from other designers. So this should help get you started with the very basics of most of the patterns you're going to see out there. All right, so we've cast on, and now we're going to do a setup row. And the first setup row is actually, even though this is a two-color project, the first row we do for setup is going to be in the main color, so that's going to match your cast on. So this is the one part of the project where you're actually doing brioche with one color only, and after this you'll be seeing two colors through the whole project. So in your, you've got your circular needles. In your left hand side needle is going to be the cast on stitches, and your tail is this way, and the yarn attached to the ball is headed over here, so you're nice and separate. All right, we use circular stitches, and I'll demonstrate that because you end up having to slide your work back over to this direction after having knit rather than turn. It's kind of like in every other row. So you will be seeing stop signs in the pattern to help give you an indicator of like when to slide versus when to turn. And basically in brioche, you work twice in one direction before you turn. And it's because we're making a reversible garment that it needs to have a sequence of rows done in order to complete the look. So when we have both colors attached, you'll have both colors on this side. You'll work one way with the main color, then you'll work another row with your contrast color, and only then do we turn. So for the setup row, which is going to be the first one after our cast on, we are going to first purl one. So I'm going to be demonstrating because it's more comfortable for me, the method where you carry your yarn in your right hand. So we're going to purl the first stitch and take it off. And then we're going to start our very first slip one yarn over. So the important part about slip one yarn over, you are always slipping your stitches purlwise, which means that you're not turning them. So I'm going to demonstrate what it is to slip purlwise before we do the stitch. Slip one yarn over. So slipping purlwise is you basically just transfer the stitch from left to right hand needle without turning it. So see how it's still the same direction. To demonstrate what it means to turn it, you would go into it as if you were going to knit, and then it's like it flips on us. So we don't want that. We want to go ahead and transfer it as if it was just transferring one needle to the next, which is purlwise, is how they say that we're transferring it. Okay, so the second part about slip one yarn over is the fact that you are always going to have your yarn to the front of the work. If you are on a row where you are knitting and this is in the back, before you doing the slip one yarn over, you would always bring it to the front. And then we are going to have it in the front. We're going to transfer the stitch from the left needle to the right needle. And then our yarn's in the front. We want to drape it over. So that is a shawl. Basically, it's a shawl that sits on top of your stitch. So it's an active stitch plus the yarn over drapes over it. But we want to bring this back to the front of the work for the next stitch, which is going to be a purl. So what we want to do is bring yarn over it like a drape, and then we want to bring that shawl back between the two needles so we're ready to have it in the front of the work again. So what that looks like in your pattern is a purl one, slip one yarn over, and then bring yarn to front, which is that BYTF. Okay, so we've done one of the most important pieces of brioche, really, like you're going to live and die by this slip one yarn over. And then we will get it into barking and burping in subsequent rows. But for right now, this is the major stepping stone that we're going to go over for the brioche. So we've done a purl one, a slip one yarn over, bring yarn back to the front. Then we are purling one, go into the front, wrap around, oops, get squirrely on me, bring that over. So purl one. Our yarn's already in the front, so we're going to slip the stitch from left to right needle, and we're going to yarn over by bringing it all the way around and then back to the front. Okay, and then purl one. And I will advise you to do this at home and talk to yourself as you do this, because I have found upon learning that this is incredibly good to coach yourself to say call out your stitches as you go. It may sound like I'm just doing this for class, but I do this at home too. All right, so we've purled one. Next one is a slip one yarn over. Our yarn's already in the front, so we transfer stitches from left to right purlwise, wrap around and bring to the front. So we've draped it over. And how that looks a little different, I will show you at the end of the row because there's a lot of strands going here, but we're going to purl the next one. And then we have the yarn in the front, slip one yarn over, purl one, slip one yarn over, There we go. Purl 1, slip 1, yarn over, purl 1. Oops. See what I did? I knew it was wrong when I did it, so I was slip 1 yarn over twice. We do not want that. Okay, now I'm purling. Okay, so if you do that, if you're like me and you got off step, you can go back and you can look. So I'm going to bring this up a little closer. So we've got a purl 1, slip 1 yarn over, 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 and purl 1. Okay, we're back on track. It's essentially every other stitch. We're going to be doing the slip 1 yarn over. So we're back to that. And then purl 1. And then we are slip 1 yarn over, purl 1, and then slip 1 yarn over, purl 1, slip 1 yarn over, purl 1, slip 1 yarn over. Okay, and then in this case, the last stitch will be, okay, so it's what it's telling you in the directions, because I want to be sure I follow that. So you've done your slip 1 yarn over. Your yard's in the front. It says go ahead and drop it. All right, you still have 1 stitch here though on the left hand needle. So do not turn. Go ahead and do, oh, you know what, that's wrong. So we've done our, we do our purl 1 into the end. That's what it is. Okay, now at this point, drop your yarn to the front. Just let it go. So we've got all of our needles here. This is when we slide, because it says drop in color, do not turn. Instead, slide stitches to the opposite end. So your needles are in a little U shape here. We're going to slide this to that side without turning it. So we're just going to move it on around. That's why it's so important to have circular needles for this and get it ready so that we can add the contrast color and start from there. So this was to demonstrate, like, this is what it looks like as if you were going to do a 1 color brioche. It's I find it easier to learn with 2 colors because it's just a lot of strands to keep track of, but the stitch anatomy is there. So we were looking at that before. The single strand should be purls or knits. The next stitch should always be a slip 1 yarn over. Pretty much you're always going to have an every other one in brioche. And that is going to be a stitch with a shawl draped over it. Okay, and it should start at one side from the right and go over to the left. That's how you know that you have done it as a shawl and not necessarily like a 1 strand, then you slip the other strand, and then it would be after that would be the yarn over. Then you've accidentally started increasing and not creating the drape shawl effect of the brioche slip 1 yarn over. That's where there's the difference. Will be a handout as well after the class. I will be sure to send that to you probably Monday, and that is designed to show the difference in a drawing about the difference between SL1, comma, yarn over, YO. So the comma is the big difference. Slip 1 yarn over with a comma, then you are actually increasing. You would do slip 1 over and then yarn over, and then you would end up having 2 separate stitches then, right? And a little lace hole that would be created. With the brioche, the slip 1 yarn over does not have a comma, and in that case, it's actually trying to tell you your shawl stitch over the active stitch. So you're slipping the stitch, but you are also creating this effect of drape. So this will make more sense as we keep going. So now we're going to do the contrast color. So we're back at the beginning of the left hand needle. The main color that we've just worked, the active ball strand, is, it's over here. So we can just put it here so you can see where it is. And I've got my new contrast color ball here that I'm going to join. So using contrast color, the first thing we're going to do is slip the outside stitch. This is the main color. The reason that we're going to slip it and not knit it or purl it is because we're trying to maintain the orange on the outside of the garment. So if we were to work it in the pink, it would turn into a pink. We don't want that. We want to keep with the main color on the first and the last stitches. So in this case, we're going to slip purlwise, slip one, boom, done. And in this case, there's no yarn over. We're just moving one from left to right. Now the next two stitches, the next stitch looks like two stitches because it's the slip one yarn over and it has the shawl over the active stitch. We are going to brioche knit that together. What brioche knit means is it's also called barking. What it means is you're essentially going to knit those two together. So instead of knitting these two strands separately, you will be just inserting your needle from underneath both strands, going up into it. And then you're going to take your color for your contrast, and easiest way to join this is to just kind of lay it between the two needles. If you are a person who is dominant, like carries the yarn in the left hand, there are probably some easier ways for you to do it. But if you are carrying in your right hand like I do it, then you kind of just drape it between, making sure that your end attached to the ball is in your right hand, because that's what you're going to be feeding off of. And you just bring that down as if you were knitting those two strands together. I'm going to demonstrate that again because mine kind of fell out. And you pull down, and then here we go. So I've barked those. I brioche knit that grouping of stitches together. So now I have a slip one and a bark one. And now my next one is going to need to be a slip one yarn over. And in order to do that, it's a reminder you always need to have your yarn in the front to start the slip one yarn over. So we're going to bring yarn to front between the two needles. We're going to transfer the stitch from left needle to right needle, and we're going to drape it over like a shawl. Now, for knitting, you usually have your strand in the back, right? So you don't need to bring it all the way back in the front like we did the last row. For knitting, you keep it back into the back, and then you just go into the next stitch grouping, which is the slip one yarn over, go underneath those two strands, and knit. Okay, so now we have the slip one, a bark one, a slip one yarn over, and a bark one. Okay, so we're just going to continue this pattern. So next one is a slip one yarn over. So you bring yarn to the front, you move the stitch from left to right, and the shortcut here is basically it's going to do the work for you to go around and into the next stitch. So once you've transferred, yarn still in the front, you can go ahead and go into those next two stitches and just do a knit, and the magic is going to happen for you. So it's already here shawled over, and then you have your next bark already done. Bring yarn to the front, slip that over, go into the next bark, and pull through. Okay, slip one, bring to the front, slip one yarn over, bark. Bring to the front, slip one yarn over, bark. And bring to the front, slip one yarn over, bark, slip one, bring to the front, slip one yarn over, bark, right, and bring to the front, slip one yarn over, bark, bring to the front, slip one yarn over, bark, bring to the front, slip one yarn over, bark, and then we get to the end here and you have one stitch left on your left needle, and the directions say, I went a little bit past it, so the last two stitches, it was bark one, and then we're going to drop this contrast color to the back here, so we don't need it now. We're going to slip one, which is just transferring stitches from left to right, and now we can turn. Okay, so before we turn, both of our working yarns in contrast color and in the main color are to the left of our needles. To our right, we see the tails now, but it will eventually, as we work through the garment, you wouldn't see any of the strands. No working strands should be on our right-hand side now. We've worked both colors, and you can start to see that there is both the orange, which is the color that we slip one yarn over. And so we have that, and then we have the individual pink strands, which was where we brioche knitted, we barked. So we're starting to get our two colors now. It does take several rows before we really build this pattern where you can really see the dominant stripes, but it will start to form and you'll be able to tell exactly where you are in terms of which one's more main color dominant or contrast color dominant. So we are going to turn our work now, and now we are ready to start the main section. Okay, great. Thank you.